Let's see here. Gotta add in the description. All right. We are live in the Facebook group and on the YouTube channel. So we're going to jump right into it today. Today we're going to be going over how $1 million wholesale companies, that's $1 million a year in revenue, plan for the year and plan for the quarter. So most importantly, how do we plan? Do we plan everything for the entire year? Do we plan everything for the week? Do we plan everything for the quarter? Well, it's pretty simple, and it comes out of a book called Traction. So first thing that we do is we want to get our 5-year vision for our company. Where do we want to be in 5 years, right? And then we break that down into a 3-year target, and then we create a 1-year plan, and then we break them down into quarterly rocks. So I'm not going to go over like all of like the big picture, like what is your company going to look like in 5 years? All that stuff is great, but what really matters is how do you plan quarter by quarter? How do you look at the end of the year? Or if you're just starting, what metrics do you need to know to be able to hit $1 million a year? Or maybe you don't want to hit $1 million a year. Maybe you just want to do $100,000 a year. That's completely okay. This video will show you how to break that down, how to know when you need to course correct and when you don't, right? Because if you are, sailing a boat and you're following an azimuth, well, if you go off that azimuth maybe 1% for 5 minutes, that's not a big deal. However, if you continue to go off that azimuth for the entire year, you're going to run into some big problems there. You're going to be at a completely different location by the end of that year. So what this will allow you to do is know when you need to course correct and basically what your azimuth should be in the first place. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go over something called a goal versus actual calculator. So this might look a little confusing to some of you guys. Don't worry, I'm going to explain it all. And by the end of this video, it will make 100% sense to you. So the first thing we want to understand is what metrics do we need to track? What metrics do $1 million a year wholesale company track? So we need to understand how many leads are we getting, right? A lead is basically anybody that gave you their phone number or consented you to contact them or gave you consent to contact them. So like a cold call lead, an SMS lead, they said, yes, like I'm interested, or yes, I would consider selling, like go ahead and call me. That's a lead. Or an inbound lead coming from PPL, direct mail, basically anybody that called you and said, yes, they do want to sell their house, right? That's going to be a lead, right? So first thing is leads. The next thing is net leads. So this is kind of like one step above your just raw leads. Net leads are going to be contacted sellers. So if this is an inbound lead, the second they fill out a form, like they become a lead, right? If it's a direct mail lead, the second they ring your phone, that's a lead, right? SMS lead might be the second someone says like, yes, I'd consider an offer. That's a lead. However, a net lead is a verified seller. So you've actually spoken to them on the phone. You've got them, and it's a, part of this is being a contacted lead. So it's a contacted lead. They do want to sell the property. Now, I don't care if they want to sell in 30 days or in 2 years. A net lead is just somebody that does want to sell the property. And then lastly, for outbound leads specifically, this is not for inbound leads. This is for outbound leads specifically. They can't be asking over 10% of the market value. The reason that I say that is because if you're doing inbound leads and someone reaches out to you and they're looking for ways to sell, they clicked on an ad, they want to sell. Maybe they are asking for a little bit too much, but that's okay. They reached out to you because they want to sell. An outbound lead, if you call somebody and they say, yeah, well, I'd sell my $1 million property for 1.1 million, that really doesn't show any intent that they want to sell. So the next thing is we're going to track our net leads, right? That's a verified seller that does want to sell at any time, and they're not asking over 10% of the market value. From there, we need to track how many appointments that we've booked. Now, our simple formula to know if an appointment is worth booking or not, we had over 5 things, and that's a MOTA. Number 1 is, do they have equity? Now, if you're doing subject to deals, this isn't as important. So if you're going to be buying the property, taking over their mortgage, not really important if they have a lot of equity. If you're strictly wholesaling and flipping, it's pretty important to make sure that they have enough equity for you to be able to buy the house and sell it. So we look for at least 30% equity. That's typically where we need to buy it to be able to sell it. Now, will we take some that have 80% equity? They don't need a lot of repairs. Like, yes, there's definitely a case-by-case basis with the appointments, but general rule of thumb is 30% equity. The next thing is they have a reason to sell. So we call that motivation, right? They have a reason to sell other than I would sell if I got the highest price, or I would sell if I got the right price, right? A legitimate reason, like I need to move, I have to relocate, I don't like the house, I'm in foreclosure, I'm going through a divorce. Those are all legitimate motivations for us to book an appointment. The third thing may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised when we looked at our data a few years ago and realized this, how much time we're wasting on these appointments is ownership, right? So that doesn't mean like, do they own the property? It means, do they fully own the property, or are all the owners on board to sell? So you'll get sellers very often that inherited 1/5 of a property and they want to like sell their share. They want to sell their shares of the property, right? That's not going to go into an appointment unless we can get all of them on the phone. So you might be asking, well, what if it just is a 1/5 seller? If it's a 1/5 seller, then our setters, or our salespeople, if we're them, we need to be trained to be able to get the rest of the people on the phone to be able to get a real appointment. But we're not going to consider it an appointment until we get everybody on board to sell. Okay, so those are your appointments. Next are going to be your offers made. Really simple. You offered them money for the property, an exact number, not like, hey, I think I could pay you between $200,000 and $300,000 for the property. That's not an offer, right? It's an exact number that you gave them in exchange for the property. Then we have contracts. Contracts are signed by the seller. I don't count verbal like agreements as a contract. A contract is you got it through DocuSign or whatever platform you're using to send out contracts. You got it back and it has your signature and the seller's signature on it. Then you've got your closed deals, right? That doesn't count until money hits your account, right? Don't say you closed the deal just because you've got a buyer on the other line. This is money has entered your account, the profit from the sale. So those are the metrics that we need to track in order to plan. So now, once we understand these metrics, I'm going to go over some baseline assumptions. So if you're just starting out and you're like, okay, I don't have any of these metrics, I have no idea what I did last quarter, or you don't have any leads from last quarter, and so you just want to get an idea of where you should be. Now, this isn't the best case scenario, and this isn't the worst case scenario. These are industry averages. I've seen companies do a lot better than this, and I've seen companies do a lot worse. But these are going to be your industry averages. So for lead to qualified lead, lead to net lead, you'll hear me use those interchangeably. 65% is the industry average. Now, if you're doing third-party text verification on inbound leads, it's going to be higher. And if you are doing like Facebook form fills that don't go to a landing page, it's going to be lower. Right? You're going to get a lot more junk. You might be closer to 40 or 50%. But 65% is a good baseline for lead to net lead. So out of all the leads you get, we're going to use some round numbers here. I'm going to do, let me see here. Let's do 65. Let's do 60. And I'll explain what I'm doing here in a second. What would I need to get to? Let's see. Yeah, maybe I won't use round numbers. That would be too difficult to do the math in public right here. Close enough. We're at 96 leads. So for every 96 leads, I'm going to use 100. For every 100 leads, we'll get roughly 63% of those that will turn into qualified leads, like actual sellers that do want to sell their property at any time. Now, the next metric varies a lot whether you're doing in person or virtual. So that is your net lead to appointment. How many net leads do you speak to that you actually get to book an appointment? Now, for virtual, if you're closing over the phone, 60% is a general rule of thumb. 60% of all of your leads will book to appointments. Now, you can be higher than that, you can be lower than that. I've gotten all the way up to 77% at like the height of my sales career when I'm sitting in the sales seat. I've got some other people doing that for me. And I've seen, companies anywhere as low as like 12%, which is absolutely abysmal. But for virtual, you want to shoot for 60%. Like that's the baseline. Now, if you're in person, you're going to appointments, they're going to need to be a little bit more motivated for you to be able to go to them. Plus, you don't want to spend your time driving to as many appointments. So you're going to be a little bit more selective. Don't worry. I'm going to show you how you make that up on the back end. You should be at 30% for virtual. Now, appointments set to offers made. This is another number that virtual is going to be different than in person. If you're virtual, your appointment set to offer made should be above 90%. Like there shouldn't be a reason. Plus, if you are virtual, like I recommend just going for a one call close. This conversion number will get a lot better. If you just take the lead, okay, they're a qualified lead. Let me give them an offer on the first call. All of these numbers will be great, right? Like your offer to contract to close, like it's all going to be a lot better because there's not as many steps involved. So if you're virtual, you should be at 90%. If you're in person, you want to shoot for about 75%, right? 75% for in person of all of your appointments set are actually going to show up, not reschedule. Like you'll be able to get an offer out. You can certainly get higher than that. You can get up to 85%, especially if you're qualifying your appointments, doing all of the systems that we teach like very, very religiously. But a good standard baseline is going to be 75% for in person and then 90% for virtual. I'm just going to use a flat 85%, kind of like a middle number there. Maybe, let's do 85%. And then your offer to contract. This also varies a lot. I had somebody in our school community today ask if they should go virtual or if they should do in person, and they're local in their market. So virtual, you will close a lot higher. Virtual, we typically shoot for 25%. Like that's like the baseline for, in person. In person, you'll close a lot higher. In person, we typically shoot for 25%. 25% is a very good number if you're in person, and it's definitely attainable. Whereas virtual, we typically see people land virtually around 15%. Now, you're going to be making more offers if you are going virtual to your appointments or you're doing your appointments virtually than if you go to them in person. You're going to be making more offers. So it should even out a little bit. You should obviously, like, your profit per deal is going to be bigger in person. You're going to lock up at a higher percentage, and your contract to close will be better as well. I'm going to go over that in a second. But you're just going to have to figure out what you want to do, and you can run the numbers for both scenarios. Typically, in-person wins, but not everybody can do in-person appointments. So 15% for virtual, 25% for in-person. And then we've got our closings, right? How many of the contracts do we lock up actually close? So if you don't know this because you haven't done your first deal yet, contracts fall out. Not all of them close. I know that's a big surprise, but some of them have title issues. Some of them, the seller didn't tell us about things that we end up finding out later. Some of them you price too high. Like all of those things are going to happen. Now that number will get better the more you do this. You're not going to price properties too high. You're going to understand how title issues work. You're going to have people that can help you solve those problems. There are ways to get that number a lot better. However, generally what we see is 65% contract to close for virtual and 75% for in-person. You can certainly get that number better. Again, like we've gotten up to 90% contract to close just because we're in person. We have very good systems, and I've seen as low as 48%. Like there, it really just depends on how good your systems are, how good you are at underwriting, your dispo list, everything like that. So these are the numbers we need to understand are these, right? We need to understand these conversions, and then we need to understand basically the lead, the net lead, appointments, offers, contracts, and close. So now we're going to go into our planning phase. So two things that we need to do to be able to plan is we need to know what was our average gross profit for last quarter, and then what was our average deal size. Now, if you don't have these numbers, we can use industry averages, right? And what we can do is you can use an industry average off of cost per lead. So I'm going to caveat here and say that if you're in a market like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, New York, your cost per lead is going to be a hell of a lot higher than this. Think about it this way. If your average home price in your market is over the median, your cost per lead is probably going to be over the median as well. And there are some like nuances there where there's low price markets that have high cost per lead just because there's a lot of competition. Oklahoma City is like a really good example of that. Really cheap houses, lots of competition. So the lead cost is very high. But in general, if you combine kind of all of the channels, you should be roughly about $100 cost per lead. And then you can look at how much you need to spend to be able to get, 32 leads a month and get this deal size. So if you want to do next quarter, let's say, for example, next year, you want to do $100,000 in revenue. That means you need to do $30,000 next quarter, right? $30,000 per quarter. And let's say for this example, your average deal size is $10,000. Okay. So your average deal size is $10,000. Your cost per lead here is $100. So I don't have that written out anywhere, but let me do it like this. I'll just do, actually, you guys can get the gist. CPL equals $100. Okay. So now your marketing spend for the month. Now you can go off the quarter if you want, but I typically look at marketing spend on a monthly basis. I need to be able to spend 19 times my $100 cost per lead. So that means I need to spend roughly $2,000 per month to make $10,000 per month. That's a 5x return on your ad spend. So this is the first step to our quarterly planning. We need to be able to know these numbers. We need to be able to know these conversions. Now, these are baseline conversions. If you have your actual numbers, what you can do is just go put them here. Let's say you had 100 leads, you had 75 qualified leads, you had 50 appointments, you had, let's call it 40 offers. You had 10 contracts and you had 8 close. Okay, so now you have right here your actual numbers. So you can just put those in your conversions. That's recommended if you have actual KPIs. So I would just go here. I'd put in my 75%. I'd put in 67, 80, 25, and 80. And then I can see for every 11 leads I get one closed deal. I can look at everything else. I only need to spend $1,100 a month to get $10,000 a month back. I would make that trade every single day. I'd be just trying to figure out, okay, how do I spend $1,100 a month? That would be my number one goal is making sure I have the money to do that. So this is the first step to our planning. Now, once we have this, what you need to do is every single week, you need to come in, and I'm going to use some, I'm going to use the baselines. I'm going to go back to baselines here. I'm going to use a higher number on the goal. Instead of $100,000, I'm going to try to hit 400,000. So I need 100,000 a quarter. Okay. $10,000 average deal size. So I'm going to do that because these numbers are going to make a lot more sense when I actually have to get 4 contracts a week versus like 0. So my goal now is $100,000 for the quarter. That's $33,000 a month. That means I need to spend $6,500 if my average cost per lead is $100. Cool. Makes sense. So now what I need to do is every single week, I need to come in here and put how many leads I got. So let's say week 1, I go over here to days in the quarter. I put them 7 days into the quarter, right? I'll put my 7 days into the quarter. And then week 1, let's say I got 100 leads, or not 100. That'd be ridiculous. Let's say I got 15 leads. I got 10 qualified leads. I got 5 appointments, 5 offers, 1 contract, and no deals. Well, now I can see, okay, well, this is my actual leads. Like, this is how many leads I got. This was my target. So my target leads, I wanted to hit 16. and I only got 15. I wanted to hit 11 qualified leads. I only got 10. I wanted to do 6 appointments. I got 5. Now I did get my contract, which is good, but I still want to make up for these other numbers. So what you do is you review this every week, or you meet with your team if you have one, and you say, okay, I only got 15 leads this week and I wanted to get 16. So that means next week I need to get an additional 1 lead. So I need to get 17 leads next week instead of the 15 that I was originally shooting for, to maintain with all of my metrics. And I'm going to look at all of my conversions and I'm going to go, okay, where did my conversions dip off? Well, right here, I can see that I was shooting for a 60% net lead to appointment and I only got 50%. So what are the chances that there's 1 lead inside my net leads that didn't book an appointment, but probably should have? Probably very high. And once you do more and more of these numbers, the number becomes very apparent. So one week you might sit down and you say, okay, we got, let's say 100 qualified leads last week, and we only booked 50 appointments. Okay, well, our average for the year, we typically book 70%. So we would have booked 70 appointments. What are the chances that there's 20 appointments just sitting in the CRM that we didn't get to? Probably pretty high. So you know that your focus for that week, we break this down annual, quarterly, weekly. You know your focus for that week is to go follow up with all of the qualified leads that you've got and turn those into appointments. And if you do that, you will stay on your azimuth. You won't float off to that 1%. You will just stay on your azimuth. Maybe you'll get off a little bit and then you'll correct, right? You might get off a little bit and you'll correct. But this is the most consistent way that I've seen wholesale companies hit their actual targets. What a lot of people do is they just say, I want to do $100,000 this year. And then they don't track any of their metrics. And then at the end of the year, they're like, fuck, I only did $50,000, right? If that's you, that's why you're doing that. You're not following your metrics, right? You're not actually adjusting as you go. And in a couple of videos from now, like I'm going to go through the NEPQ process again, but I'm actually going to be breaking down how to tackle each one of these metrics. So if you know the industry average for your offer made to contract is 20% and you're at 8%, well, how do you actually fix that number? If you know the industry average for appointments set to offers made is 85% and you're at 50, how do you actually fix that number? I have literal SOPs for every single metric that exists and exactly how to fix them. And every single one I've tested and has worked, right? To where now we're at the point to where we just need to do more volume until one of these metrics breaks again. But I can tell you how to get from 0 to 1 million based off of these metrics so far. So you need to understand your leads, you need to understand your conversions, and you need to track them on a weekly basis and course correct. So that's exactly how a $1 million a year wholesale company tracks their metrics. If you guys have any questions, let me go through the comment section for a second and see what we've got here. I'll answer some of the questions and then we will hop off. So Chris asked, will there be a recording of this available? Yes, Chris, 2 ways you can access this recording. Number 1, wait about 5 or 10 minutes and it will be uploaded into the Facebook group. Number 2, if you guys are not following me on YouTube, that's where I would probably go to watch all of these recordings. It's just a lot friendlier. So you can just look up John Lalonde on YouTube. You guys can go subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're both live in the Facebook group and the YouTube. Can you please share this Google Sheet, great Google Sheet to keep track? Maritza, we have this sheet inside of our school community. So all of the documents, the SOPs, like everything that I'm talking about, that is all inside of our school community. So if you join that, you just have to go into the classroom and you'll see the KPI trackers, like contract scripts, basically everything that you would need. So it looks like we just tackled all of the comments. Hopefully you guys have an incredible 2025. I really hope you guys go in and start executing on this stuff. I promise you guys, you will not regret it. That's all the time we have for today. I'm signing off. Later, guys.